Though my journey with slow living isn't new, it's recently accelerated because I've found that since 2020, the quality of store-bought food and restaurant food is not as good as it once was. So I've been resorting to more homemade meals, more from-scratch meals, but I don't always have a lot of time. So there are a few tricks that allow me to embrace the aspects of slow living, but also maximizing my time. And with that in mind, today I want to share with you a few things that I do in the kitchen to make the most out of my time while still enjoying the benefits of home-cooked food and slow living. For my lifestyle, what I have found that helps is to choose recipes that are not only healthy, but also require very little hands-on time. So one of my favorite ways to do that is through no-knead sourdough bread. So for this, you can see after mixing the ingredients together, all I'm doing is stretching and folding the dough. This happens in cycles about every 15 minutes, and then after that, about every 30 minutes. So for instance, I stretch and fold the dough between like 6 and 8 times every 15 minutes, 3 times, and then I increase that to 6 to 8 times about every 30 minutes, 3 times. And there's some flexibility here. Usually the way this works out with timing is I have to go pick up my daughter from school around the halfway point, probably around the second round in the 30-minute intervals. And so it actually sits for about, 45 minutes or an hour or so, and it works totally fine. So you don't have to be present the entire time for this recipe to be successful and delicious. And one of the great things about this is that time is on your side here. So on this particular day, I was just trying to tidy up. Sometimes, I don't know if I even mentioned this on YouTube yet, but one thing that I also do is I am an English teacher at a North Carolina university. So sometimes I do grading, respond to emails, work on assignments, that sort of stuff. But on this day, I just had to clean up the kitchen. So you can see the bread is sitting there covered, and I'm just doing things around the house while it is working its magic. So the sourdough starter is starting to metabolize and work on those grains and make a delicious fermented dough that will be turned into bread later. But in the meantime, I'm just doing things that I need to get done and saving a lot of time rather than having to knead things by hand or doing other cooking projects that require a ton of hands-on time. So during all of those stretch and fold cycles, you have that time in between to do whatever it is you want to do or that you need to get done. And you might have to stop at first every 15 minutes and then every 30 minutes a few times. But like I said before, you can also stretch that out a little bit more if that works for your schedule. This is definitely making bread is an art and a science, but there is a little bit of wiggle room there. So don't be afraid to just work with the timing that suits your lifestyle the best. On this particular day, during one of the stretch and fold cycles, we did take a sourdough discard brownie break. So when my little girl came home from school, we had some brownies and enjoyed our time together. And then we were able to get back at it. So the next step after all the stretch and fold cycles is to just take a wet towel or a beeswax wrap, whatever it is that you have, and let the dough sit on the counter for about 5 to 6 hours or until doubled. So that's basically the rest of the day. You don't have to deal with your bread at all. We'll get back to the sourdough in a little bit. In the meantime, on this day, I made dinner. So this happened to be my husband's birthday. So he wanted beef lo mein. And I used homemade egg noodles, which are one of my other favorite ways to incorporate slow cooking and slow living into our busy lifestyle. So making homemade egg noodles does require some work on the front end, but it actually frees up a lot of time later on the back end. So what I do is I like to make a big batch of homemade egg noodles about once a month or maybe every month and a half or so. It kind of depends on how much we or how often we eat noodles. But that way I have homemade noodles. I stick them in the freezer and I can use them whenever I want them. And then on those days, I don't have to make homemade noodles, but I get to eat homemade noodles. But let's be clear, just because I'm trying to add more slow living into my lifestyle doesn't mean I'm not a mess. As you can see by my overboiling pot, I forgot to take the lid off my pot because I got distracted by doing too many things at one time and it overboiled. So just because we're doing slow living lifestyle practices doesn't mean that things don't happen in the kitchen sometimes. So once the noodles were cooked, the vegetables were sauteed, and the steaks were done, I made a quick orange sauce, and then we were able to have a delicious homemade meal for my husband's birthday that included homemade noodles, but I didn't have to make any noodles that day. The day is coming to a close, so it's time to get back to the sourdough. It's been about 6 hours, so it's time to get the dough out of the bowl and start shaping it. I like to put the dough on the counter, split it in half, and then begin to shape it on a dry counter. I will say here, I made a mistake. I wiped my counter clean, and it wasn't totally dry from the water, so it was a little slippery. You do want a dry counter to have a little friction to create that tension. So you twist it. I like to twist it clockwise and pull it toward myself to shape it into a perfect little ball. Then once both of them are done, you can let them rest for about 15 to 20 minutes to start developing a nice skin on the outside of the dough. After that last rest, you just take either Banneton baskets, or in my case, I use bowls with tea towels and a little bit of flour sprinkled on top. Put the dough face down inside of your basket or bowl, and then I just take the left and right side of the dough gently and pinch it together, and then the top and bottom sides of the dough and pinch it together to create a nice seam. And the dough, just a reminder, is face down inside of your bowl or basket, so that way tomorrow when you flip it out to bake, it'll be right side up. Then just wrap the bowl in plastic, or you can cover it with a plastic bag, which I like to do, just a little more economical and earth friendly, and stick it in the fridge for 12 to 15 hours to ferment and rise. So I will say I have left my dough in the fridge for more than 15 hours, closer to 24 hours, and it's been totally fine. So again, there's a little wiggle room here, but if you're playing by the rules, so to speak, 12 to 15 hours, it will be ready for baking. It's the next morning and the dough has been in the fridge for about 12 hours. So before taking it out, I did preheat 2 cast iron Dutch ovens in the oven at 500 degrees and let them get pretty darn hot. I probably let them preheat for about 20 to 30 minutes inside of the hot oven. Then just take everything out of the fridge. I use parchment paper and put it right on top of the bowl, flip it over, so that way the dough is out of the bowl and right side up. Immediately after getting the dough out of the fridge and getting it onto the parchment paper, dust it with flour and to prepare for scoring. I will say, I think I should have used more flour here. I like a little more contrast between the crust and the scoring, but you can experiment with what you like. Grab a razor blade or a lame, which I like to use, and score your bread. I am not an expert in bread art, so I just do a really simple wheat design. The deep scoring on the right, the arc, that's really to help the bread get that nice ear. And then the other scoring, the wheat design, is really more artistic, but I'm not the best bread artist yet. Then get these in the oven with the cast iron lid on for about 25 minutes at 500 degrees, then drop the temperature to 475 and bake without the lid for about 10 to 12 minutes, which will vary for your oven. I have done 20 minutes, which is too much. I've done 10 minutes, which is too little. So for my oven, I have found about 12 minutes is perfect for that second half of the baking process. On my busiest days, I like to make sourdough discard pizza because you don't need anything extra than what's already in your fridge as long as you have sourdough discard. So here you can see I put straight sourdough discard on a hot baking sheet. I baked that and preheated it at about 425 for about 20 minutes or so. Then just take a scoop of sourdough discard, spread it onto the baking sheet until it's the thickness you prefer. Drizzle with a little olive oil and salt and pepper and bake in the oven for about 10 minutes or until the crust starts to get golden. Then all you do is take whatever you have in your fridge and chop it up for toppings. Here I had broccoli, leftover steak from my husband's birthday dinner, and some onions. And when the crust is done, take it out of the oven, put your sauce on. In this case, I used fettuccine Alfredo sauce that I had left over. Throw on your leftover toppings, add a little bit of cheese, bake it in the oven until it's golden and delicious, and you have a pizza that's homemade as easy as that. It's almost as quick to make as it is for me to tell you about it. And finally, here are the 2 loaves of sourdough bread. Don't forget, you can grab this recipe down below in the description box. This particular recipe makes 2 loaves, which for my family of 3 feeds us for more than a week. We use it for toast in the morning. I like to top it with canned bruschetta. It's great with avocado for avocado toast. You can use make breadcrumbs with it or croutons. And if you feel like you can't get through all of it, you can slice it and freeze it and have homemade bread whenever you want, but only having been in the kitchen to do it one time. During these seasons of life that are particularly busy, it's especially important for me to be selective, to choose the things that work for my lifestyle, and especially things that work for me, not create more work for me. So that means hands-off recipes when possible, doubling up on things and freezing them so I can use them later, and selecting recipes that use ingredients that I already have and that are quick to make. And that way I can get back to doing the things I love doing the most. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video, my third video on YouTube. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to like this video. And if you check out the description box below, there are links to some of the recipes and other information that pertains to this video. Again, thank you so much, and I will see you again next time.